Hey guys, it's Roy from In Light in the Shadows. Really excited to be joining you on this one. This is episode 9. Last week, I was with Paolo Piliero and we talked about his amazing charity work for the mind. He has done 7,300 press-ups plus and raised over $4,000 now, I believe it is. I'm going to put the link up right now on the screen for his Just Giving page, in case he keeps on there for Sunday onwards. I'm not sure if he will, because the guy smashed it. And I want to say, first and foremost, about that charity, raising the money for it. My gosh, you guys are absolutely amazing. There's been so much generosity been involved with it. So I believe the charity mind will just be so touched by your generous donations. So after this episode, get on it, check Paolo's special episodes 1 and 2, and just see the amazing work that he's done over the lockdown. But with that aside, tonight is such a spontaneous one. It's one that's just come out of the woodwork from nowhere. And as I say this every time, but this one's going to be quite special because my guest tonight, it is tonight for me, wherever you're watching, whether it's in the morning, afternoon or evening, my guest is just come out of nowhere really. And sometimes in life, you just meet people that you have that instant click and you're like, wow, there's something about this person, and I guess the feelings reciprocated sort of thing. So yeah, we've just started our new job, but I'm going to let Danny speak a bit more, so I'm going to welcome him. So guys, welcome Danny. How you doing, fella? You all right?
All right, mate. Yeah, I'm all good, mate. How are you?
Buzzing. It's quite funny because we've like gone, oh, how you doing, mate? How you doing? We only saw each other probably about
literally a few hours ago, having a cheeky one.
We were, mate. And that's the vibe that we got, haven't we? Because we just started a new job together. And I don't know, bro, like I walked straight through that door on the very first day, knowing there was about 5 or 10 of us. Didn't know him from Adam. And I go to the left and I see a desk free. And there you are, right in front of the desk I chose.
Yeah, I know. Absolute legend, to be fair. I remember it quite vividly because you come up to me like and said hello to me like you knew me for years, like we were best mates already. And I instantly knew at that moment in time, I was like, yeah, I like this guy. This guy is cool. Because obviously with our job role in that, I was kind of expecting a lot of sort of macho status type of guys. And
hold on a minute. You saying I ain't got...
You've got gains, hey. I've just seen Romans flexing out there.
Yeah, oh, I got them all as well. And that's no gym time.
So, but all jokes aside, I genuinely thought that, and obviously it's quite an imposing situation to be in because obviously you're in a room full of 10 guys, and you think to yourself, right, there's a lot of competition in here, and then. Obviously, my mindset to our job role wasn't, about sort of being authoritative. Actually, it was being more welfare-based.
Yeah.
Myself, I'm probably the only one that's going to have that view there. But then, obviously, chatting to yourself, it was actually quite refreshing and also kind of healthy for me to kind of realise, actually, I might have this a little bit wrong.
There you go. But it's so class, mate. As I was saying to the viewers on the intro, you can take things in life with a pinch of salt and you keep yourself to yourself, or you can actually just go, oh, hold on a minute, they seem all right, I'm going to open the door again. It's that whole social interaction. I find it like a peculiar thing at times. You're already thinking 1,000 thoughts.
With how it is nowadays as well, like, with your social media, et cetera, it takes the onus away from actual interactions and genuine interactions. So it is actually a lot harder, I tend to find for myself, to kind of read people, although it is one of the things that I do pride myself on. But at the same time, it is actually with the whole sort of society that we live in with regards to, social media, etc. A lot of sort of like the basic skills in life, like your hellos. I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I mean, a little hello makes the biggest of difference, doesn't it? And like how you said hello to me was, oh shit, okay, cool. Like, this is really, I didn't expect that. And boom, from there, perceptions start to change, don't they? So
100%, mate. It's class. And I think after that first hour, we could have just kept ourselves to ourselves, but we just took it from there, really. And I feel like we clicked day by day. And that's why I wanted you on my show, brother, because And it's even calling you brother. Like, you don't call people brother very soon, but the
Yeah,
bromance is real. Even our missuses are like,
I know. Yeah,
you know,
literally. You were there today. To be fair, a little jealous one in there.
yeah, Sharice is like, oh, is that Danny? Oh, Danny, talking about it and stuff. You're on first name basis, mate. She knows you and everything. It's like,
Awesome, glad. That's
yeah,
it.
man.
Now we just need to get the two matriarchs to meet. That's it, and then
That's
we're
it.
free. We're playing sailing there, ain't
That's
it?
right, bro.
They can be BFFs. We're BFFs. That's it. Boom.
Yeah. So what I've enjoyed a lot, I haven't told you this. I've really enjoyed spending time with you on the side and just organically getting together in that free times on lunch slots and drinks breaks. And I've had to catch myself a couple of times. I feel myself like going over to you. I'm like, hold a minute, there's like 8 other blokes here. But I just naturally drawn to you. I'm just like, yeah. And it happened all of the first week because we're in week 3 now. And that first week, we just clicked and we're drawn to each other, as we've alluded to. But on top of that, it was like, we just started talking about each other's lives. And yeah, man, I just so inspired by some of the stuff you told me. And I know for a fact it's not something you blab to the world and that. But yeah, in Light in the Shadows, as the viewers know, is about lighting up those dark times in our lives and about feeling that you've got that platform to say, I'm going to talk about this. So yeah, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what it is when you share information about yourself, it always depends on who you're sharing that information with. So, you know, how much you say, what you say is all dependent on how that individual is received and or how you receive that individual. So I suppose in our case, it was very much 1 second. Can you turn that down for me, baby, please? All you can hear is sexual noises from the TV.
Man's on YouTube right now.
But yeah, and obviously, like a massive part of that is obviously how I receive you, and when you think about it, it's like if I didn't particularly say, for example, gel with you and this, that, the other, I wouldn't tell you certain things, and it goes back to the fact that there was an instant connection there, so therefore it made it a little bit easier to say certain things, and then obviously as we sort of had conversation and we've managed to digress into each other's lives a little bit more, and then actually there's almost that notion of oh, actually there's compatibility through stories, so whether it be through fun times we've had, the experiences we've shared, not together, but obviously in our lifetimes, or, the dark times, everyone goes through dark times, and some more so than others, and some more traumatic than others. But the fact that, we can share those stories with one another and be comfortable in sharing those stories obviously helps sort of cement this kind of, I suppose, a bond. I suppose in our case, I can only refer to it in our case, but yeah, like me sharing my story with you and being so open and transparent with you was a direct sort of reflection of you being able to do the same, and being, it's almost like an unspoken kind of thing. Like, how do you know someone is actually like decent, genuine, and trustworthy? Everyone can talk the talk, I suppose, but I think with certain people, you just feel it. You just feel it, and it's almost like an unspoken thing. But yeah, that was the case in this, and yeah, we've shared some many good stories.
Yeah, haven't we, bro?
Yeah, we have.
Like we've known each other like years and that. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then what you said is like massive. I want that for like the Shadows and this YouTube channel. I want a place where people can tell their story, but not only that, people can get plugged in and we can build a community where people relate to these stories. People go, oh yeah, man, I'm not the only one. And yeah, that's what it's all about.
I think it just starts from not being scared. And I mean, initially you will always be scared to share the sensitive information, the stuff that is hard to talk about, I think. But once you get past that initial fear and realize actually no harm's come from that, it kind of almost instills a confidence within you to almost, okay, cool. Do you know what? Actually, I don't feel as afraid. And then you tell one more person, and then one more person, and then one more person. And then, vicariously through that, you start to kind of maybe not say change people's lives, but at least get people thinking about certain things. And I suppose this is exactly what we're trying to do here, I suppose, in that respect.
Yeah, man. So just about creating trust and changing the way I feel like society's gone, particularly in the last 10 years or so, with technology's just advanced so much. And, you know, we've just had a pandemic lockdown. And I just think it's so important that we don't lose these interactions that have come down. Actually, you referred to earlier about storytelling, thousands of years, like even like ancient England, they're all about storytelling. That's how things got passed down. They'd gather around their food and they'll tell stories. And it's, I guess it's the foundation of who we are. And so, yeah, it's just great that we've already begun that. And then just the last minute, and I say last minute because usually I have my guests quite well lined up. And I had, at one point, it was quite good. I had like 3 or 4 just stacked up, like, yes, I'm ready to go. And then started work and I'm just like, oh, shoot, I need to get on it. And then it just felt natural. I'm glad you didn't feel any pressure by it, because some people get a bit shy about it.
But to be fair, I mean, I'll be completely honest. It's something that I definitely wouldn't normally do. And I'm not one for exposing myself, especially on the sort of social media platform. I'm quite a direct type of guy. So, you know, I share my story with yourself and my friends and my family and, you know, those that I meet around me and that. And that's it. That's as far as it kind of goes for me. But obviously meeting you and obviously doing what you're doing, you know, you're doing a fantastic thing. So I thought, you know what, actually, this is a really good thing for me to kind of break that sort of kind of notion in my head. That sort of, it's almost like a fear factor almost, you know, that sort of, that kind of like, oh no, like you say, shy and nervousness and stuff like that. But I think sometimes in life, we just have to kind of put that aside and look at the bigger picture. So yeah, but in this case, like, it's just, I do it for you, my G.
Yeah, my brother. Oh, enough respect. Honestly, enough respect, because this whole channel was a big step for me as well. And you know, I wrote a article for SiteReg, and I'll put it on the screen right now for people to look through. And it's a 4-minute read max, so just click on that, guys. Pause this right now if you can, and just have a quick read, because I go deep, and I go really vulnerable, and it's all about the story of why I started in Light in the Shadow. So I just want to encourage you to give that a go. And we're just talking right now about being brave, and especially as men, like we give it the big one all the time. We say, oh yeah, I'll be fine. No, I don't want to let anyone see or hear about how I might be struggling. But that's me just saying to get you guys tonight, and wherever you are right now, just give that a read, because hopefully it'll inspire and encourage you to chase something in your life where you feel a bit, oh, what are people going to think? Am I ready? I'm not sure if I want to do this. Let that inspire you guys. So yeah, look, Danny, mate, something we clicked about is that something we had in common, and it was how we've both worked in the children's residential care home. So like looked after children and that. So yeah, I just want to hear about your story about in terms of employment. So we'll get on to the meat of
Okay,
your inspirational story, and about how you took your chance, and you know your resilience ultimately. But yeah, I just want to ask you and give the viewers a bit of insight about who you are and your working background. So you've graduated uni, which we'll get to later, but you've gone into employment. So tell us about your working life at the minute.
So working life at the minute, I work for alongside your main man Rory here, in the Nottingham City Council. And then previous to that, I suppose my main role, and it was my main ambition actually, I was working in a children's home. And it was something that I thoroughly enjoyed. And I suppose, as Rory mentioned earlier, we'll move on to a little bit later, the meat, the juice of the story, right, as it were. But yeah, it was definitely something that I wanted to do 100%. I had many avenues to go down. I was quite a gifted individual, I suppose, as it was put to me quite a few times. But for some reason, that was the avenue that I needed to go down, because I just knew that it would be something that I'm genuinely quite good at. And I suppose I looked at it as also a job that I wouldn't really necessarily see as a job, but more so as just an experience, I suppose. And wow. I think that was the most important thing. And as I was there, it was definitely that, an experience. And, you know, I left that job now over a year ago, and I still tell the stories about it today. you know.
You do, don't you? You do. Like,
Yeah, I do.
you see you see mad things in the care homes with teenagers and looked after children. You just like, there's a part of you just get gripped because everything's on the line. Like, you've got to stay professional, you've got to safeguard, you've got to maintain confidentiality and all these important things. But ultimately, it's about you open your heart ultimately because it's a care job. So
Absolutely. You share your life with them, don't you? So, as we all know, when you share your life with someone, it's a little bit more than a job, I suppose. And, you know, it becomes, how do I put it? It becomes an emotional connection rather than just a job. So we're dealing with young people who, you know, they can be testing, they can be trying, but at the same time, they can bring you some of the best moments in your life. So, you know, it's definitely one of those types of jobs where you need you know, you need your stones about you. You know, you need to show real, true resilience and strength, but also you do need to show that sort of soft and delicate side. And that was an area which, you know, fortunately I had really great mentors to kind of really help me through that. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, my missus, she works within the residential children's home sector. She's the deputy manager.
that's brilliant.
So, you know, I still get to live that life through her
Yeah.
stories. And, you know, it's nice to hear the stuff that she goes through. And sometimes not so nice, but, you know, it is, if you share that with somebody, you know, there's always a story. So yeah, absolutely. So yeah, went into the residential children's home sector. It was absolutely fantastic. I absolutely loved it. The young people were fantastic. I love the challenge that it posed and presented. But sometimes I'll be honest with you, I absolutely hated it at times. The long shifts, them keeping you up for a full, you know,
Oh boy.
20 hours and smashing up the house, trying to smash you up. You know, I've got a few cheeky little marks and scars on myself from, you know, from when things got really bad. But still, I absolutely 100% hold it down as to be one of the best jobs I've had.
Yeah, it's like the most rewarding job, but in terms of work-life balance and just the stress that it can have on you,
Yeah,
you've
absolutely.
got to filter it, obviously, like any job, but it's just incredible. And you meet some incredible people as well. Like, people are in it for the same reasons, the right reason, just because you care and you want to help improve their lives. It's just, oh, it's brilliant. So anyway, anyone who's watching, who's, you know, contact Danny or me, and you're in the care sector, we want to say massive respect and we love you. You guys are,
Absolutely. I
we
have to
salute you.
salute you
That's
as
right, we
well.
salute you, man.
And with this whole COVID thing as well, you lot are still going out there, still putting other people before yourselves. You know, it's
Massive,
a true testament to, you know, the type of people that you are.
defo. Yeah, come on, man. Let's get stuck in. So we mentioned to our viewers that you've obviously gone in the care sector and stuff like that. Let's go all the way back. Let's go back to, you know, your childhood, from whatever you feel comfortable or can remember. Is there anything you could like just give a little bit of insight, pending how you feel about what home life was like, what dynamics was going on?
Yeah, so right. I mean, my missus is listening. She doesn't really know the full ins and outs of it all, so I suppose this will be good for her to hear as well. But
Right.
yeah. So my mum was 17 when she had me, and my dad was, I think he was 20. Um, Obviously, back in them days, I mean, I'm 30 years old, so 30 years ago, England was a very different country, and I suppose the ethnic minorities were subjected to a lot of sort of racism, and it was a very difficult time, I suppose, to be of an ethnic minority back then, and I suppose even earlier on. But I suppose this is why I'm grateful we live in the generation that we live in now, and we're a lot more accepting. But yeah, so my mum was 17, so still a very young person herself. She had me, then a year later, she had my brother, and then, you know, obviously my father, he was about, but again, at a 21-year-old man with no education. Again, my mum didn't have an education. It was very difficult, I suppose, in that time. And I suppose the norm and the expected would be, right, my old man, he gets a job, he provides for the family, mum stays at home, looks after the children. But unfortunately, that wasn't the dynamic. And
Mm.
when I look back at it now, it's two very young people who still haven't found themselves looking after the most prized possession and not having the skills to look after them. So
Got you.
I won't get into the nitty gritty of
No,
it
you don't
all,
have
but
to.
I think when I was 6 and my brother was 5, we ended up getting put into the care system due to my old man obviously getting a little bit physical with myself and, you know, laying down the beat down, as it were, you know. So, yeah, and then I ended up in care along with my brother, and that's where the story sort of starts to begin, to be honest with you.
Wow.
So we were sort of, back then, there wasn't really many sort of Asian background family households that were fostering, or any sort of ethnic minority background families that were fostering. So it was predominantly, you know, white families. And I suppose that's a testament in itself that they were prepared to open their homes up and, you know, to just try and help young people regardless of their creed and colour. So I've had some very fond memories of being in care, but also have some quite not so fond memories. But we'll get on to how the not so fond memories were flipped and made into positives, as it were. So, yeah, I was in foster care up until about the age of 10, 11. Bounced around from home to home. Obviously, a lot of them were temporary homes. And yeah, so we was with, from what I can remember, me and my brother and I, we were with a family, and unfortunately, even though we stayed there for about a year, it wasn't the greatest, and it was quite apparent to me from a young age that people get treated differently, and I noticed that, you know, we were sort of treated as second best. We got, you know, second best things, especially in comparison to their biological children, which was obviously always a bit of a tough pill to swallow, as it were. I mean, looking back now, it's, you know, I can understand why, but back then it was very much like, that's not fair, you know. So during those years, you start to build up this whole "that's not fair, why me" kind of sort of chip on your shoulder, as it were. And then I managed to get in contact. Sorry, my social workers managed to arrange sort of contact between my mum, myself, and my brother, and so on and so forth. And then sort of the process as it goes, you know how it goes. You have contact, you build up contact, and then you sort of like have overnight stays. Then the overnight stays get a little bit longer and longer, and then after the final assessment, as it were, is she deemed fit enough to sort of look after my brother and I, which transpired she was. So at the age of like 11, I think it was, 10, 11 years old, we actually got moved back in with my mum, who literally managed to get a house. So it was me, my brother, and my other brother, my youngest brother. But of course, it was just my mum looking after us, which is very difficult, especially for a woman who hasn't really looked after children, who's literally, you know, been able to sort of like live her own life and not have to worry about, you know, the consequences of having children, or the responsibilities of having children. So to then now have 3 boys in a house, and she's literally responsible for all of them, it is a big responsibility. So, and also she was working 2 jobs to keep the house. So a lot of the sort of day-to-day responsibilities fell down to me. So it kind of worked out that actually I was looking after my 2 brothers, you know, making
like
them
a father
breakfast.
role.
I just think like a big brother role, but I think just being the sort of responsible, I say responsible one. How responsible are you at 11 years old? You know, how do you gauge that? But what I do know is that, you know, I had to sort of sort breakfast out. I had to then walk us. We all fortunately went to the same school, so we walked us all to school, and then, you know, I'd walk us home. We'd see our mum in the morning. She'd leave at like sort of 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. She'd wake me up and then make sure this, that, and the other happens. So then obviously then I'd get the lads ready and myself ready, and we'll go to school, and, you know, we'll come back, and obviously my mum wasn't there. So, you know, I had a key, let myself in, and then, you know, I did the best as I could, I suppose. And I can remember making cheese and pickle sandwiches, and my 2 brothers didn't like pickle.
Oh, what? Branson pickle?
And yeah, literally, we only had like a few rounds of bread left. So Yeah, I actually because I didn't know what to do, but we just kind of like picked around it and stuff like that. I mean, I didn't mind pickles, so I ate it. And then and then I think skip a long story short, try and make a long story shorter, as it were. I remember, we were upstairs playing. I don't know if it was like board games or like a card game or something like that, like Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh or something.
Pokemon, stop
and then there's a knock at the door. I do remember this quite vividly. So there's a knock at the door. So I've gone up to the bedroom window and I see two black hats. And I pulled away from the window, and then they've knocked again. And they've said it's the police. And then I've looked, and they've looked up and they've seen me, and they've asked us like, "Oh, is anybody in? Is it okay for you to open the door?" Of course, being an 11-year-old boy, when you're presented with two uniformed police officers, it's already instilled in you then that, actually you've got to do what they say, you've got to listen to them, this, that, the other. Mm-hmm. So of course, I've gone downstairs, I've opened the door, they were kind, they were, from what I can remember, I remember flashes of it all. And then they've come in and like, "Where's your mum?" I was like, "Oh, she's not here, this, that, the other." And then all of a sudden, I think it was about an hour and a half later, no, about an hour later. So my youngest brother, he's got a different dad to me and my middle brother.
Yeah.
And he lived round the corner. So he'd obviously just finished work and found out what was happening from one of the neighbours who had called him. So he's come racing back. And then obviously he's just trying to say, like, no, you can't take them away, this, that, the other, because he already knew. I didn't know what was going on at that time.
Got you.
And then all of a sudden, probably about half an hour later after that, my mum has come back and, she's sort of screaming and shouting. And then I remember it picture clear. She goes, "Why did you let them in?" To myself. And, I almost like felt to myself, like, I don't know what else to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I remember seeing her crying and walking up and down the kitchen, pacing back and forth, because I think she knew that that's it. We're going to be taken off of her. But obviously I didn't know that at that precise moment in time. And then I think the hardest moment in that whole story, in the whole of this, was the fact that because of sorry, what's my phone? Because of Jake, my youngest brother, his father living around the corner. He was able to go and stay with his dad. Obviously, given my situation and my middle brother's situation, that wasn't an option.
No.
Due to safeguarding reasons, obviously. Mm-hmm. So, literally, long story short, we got put straight back into care. And then that was where it was, right, that's where the story sort of really gets a little bit juicy, as it were.
Yeah. Okay.
At that time, now we're sort of a bit more clever, I suppose, and a bit more attuned and aware to the system, how it works, what to expect, how people are. So this is where I sort of really learn about people and really learn about behaviours. And so, we ended up getting put back into care, and me and my brother ended up in this foster home. And initially she was lovely. And this is when I started to have concept of how much, foster carers get paid. So I was at this foster carers. Initially it was fine, but then I was there for a few months, and that, like, I remember, always feeling hungry. Like, I was always hungry. And when I look back at it now, we was literally met with just the very, very basic of sustenance. So sandwich, crisp, chocolate, fruit, that was it. And that was pretty much every day apart from the weekend. So believe it or not, the best meal that I had during that period of time was actually school dinners, which I'm super grateful for. And hold tight, Marcus Rashford, sending out that
Come on, go
Rashford.
Even though he's a Man United player, but we'll let him off. Go on, Marcus.
So, you know what I mean?
He's getting an honorary doctorate for that. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well,
fair play.
You know what I mean? And I read the letter, to be honest with you. It was like 4 pages long. So, shout out Marcus. Rashi.
Get him on the show. One day.
One day, yeah, absolutely. I hope you. Obviously, like, and then I've started to really notice other things as well. Like, you know, obviously at that age, you become more aware to sort of branding, clothing, and the types of things that your social or your peers will have. And you kind of want that. As a young person, you measure yourself by your friends, you know, the people that you stand with. So they all have really nice things.
Yeah.
And I'm there met with really not so nice things. And obviously that opened the doorway to bullying and stuff like that. Um, so what I did notice was also, you know, like the money that they got for us was actually not really being invested into my brother and I, but it was being invested into the biological children. So they would be getting all the designer, your Nikes, your Adidas's and stuff like that, and your tracksuits and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And then we're down shoe zone. You know what I mean? Not that I'm knocking shoe zone, but, you know, that money there was for
There's
us
a
to
clear
have.
gap, isn't there? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Yeah.
there's a massive disparity. So, you know, and I started to was aware of like, oh, how come I don't have that? How come I? So I became a bit more inquisitive, etc., etc. So, cutting that story down, after about sort of like a year, I'd realised at this point in time that I just genuinely wasn't happy, and this is someone who I haven't spoke about yet, but my grandma, my absolute rock. I love that woman so damn much. And if it wasn't for her just being there and me having the fond memories of her, I don't know where I would be. But I remember running away from school one time. So for those that don't know Leicester, my school that I went to is in sort of Braunston area, and my grandma lives sort of like near the Birstall area. So it's probably about 5 miles from each other. So and being sort of like 11, 12 years old, I remember sneaking out of the gate at school and walking all that way just because I wanted
Wow.
to just see my grandma and be at the door. Um, Going back a little bit, when I was living with my old man and my mom at the beginning, you know, sort of pre-6, now how you get flashes of memories, only like a little
Yeah.
snippet of a memory.
Yeah.
I remember me and my grandma were talking about this, like not last week, the week before last, but I remember she used to walk past the window, and I used to wait at the window. I don't know why, but she used to walk past the window, and I used to run to the letterbox, and I used to shout "Mum" because I call my grandma "Mum," and I think that's probably one of the reasons why my mum wasn't always the best mum to me. But "Mum, mum, mum," and then she'd like pretend to walk off. I don't know if I cried or whatever, but then she'd come running back, and then you know I think this is where my sort of love for her comes in, because she would always then sort of try and take me away. And I remember some of the stories she used to tell me, how she would always try and at least get us both, but you know, she'd always end up trying to get it. So she always ended up taking me, even though she tried to get Ashley. But you know, it just, I suppose my mum and dad didn't want to let both go. They just wanted to keep one or whatever. So
Yeah.
I suppose it was more manageable with just the one. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, she was a massive, massive part in my life. And she was the one person in my life where I actually got a sense of joy and happiness from, even if it
Wow.
was just getting Smarties or just sitting down, chilling, or going to the park, eating. And this is why I eat
Come
these
on.
bad boys today.
Come on now. What we
Hey,
got? Pistachios. Oh,
pistachios.
bit healthy. Unlike Smarties. What
Honestly, and
color?
she used
What
to
color
look
Smarties? Come on.
orange all
Orange.
day.
Ledge.
um, but yeah, literally. So it's crazy because this will come on to the point that I'm trying to make a little bit later. Is, you know, those key little moments, those memories, those positive little things, they stay with you. So, and don't ever try and lose them, and don't ever let
Come
them
on.
be overcast with the negative kind of thought.
Come
So
on, bro.
anyway, going back to this, me running away from school to go and see my grandma, it was only because I just wanted to feel nice for once. And I just wanted to be
Wow.
in a place where I could just be like nice and cool and happy. And then I
Wow.
remember it about, my grandma delayed it. She delayed calling social services for about 2, 3 hours because she just wanted to spend time with me. Because my old man, I don't know if people are aware, but in order to have visitation with other family members, they need direct parental consent. So with my old man, he didn't exactly appreciate my grandma, his mother. So he always denied that visitation there. Um, and obviously on my mother's side, because she, oh, we didn't even get to that, but basically my mum, after we were taken away, ran off to Portsmouth, and then ended up having a sort of love child with my dad's best mate. But
Yeah.
we'll, you know, that is what it is. So, yeah, and absolutely, like, it was just a moment that I do remember vividly of just, right, I knew that the sun's about to go down. Social services arrived,
Shoot, man.
boom, this, that, the other. They asked me why I ran away. I explained the situation and that I wasn't happy in that home. And then, they ended up moving me somewhere else. And then they had an interview with my brother. And I think due to the fact that I had gone missing from school, adults can be very manipulative and very clever when it comes down to sort of getting young people to say what they want to say. So, my brother, he said, no, I want to stay. I'm happy here. But I remember it quite clearly. Me and my brother were always hungry, and I'd always sort of just be like, this isn't cool, bro. This is me paraphrasing, as it were. But yeah, so this is where sort of me and my brother were really, really close. And I think this is at the start of where we started to drift apart a little bit.
Got you.
So he ended up staying. I ended up going to a different home. And then from there, I just bounced around from home to home. I was very lucky, though, in the midst of all of this. And I'm not going into too much detail about the homes that I'd been to. The reason why I bounced from home to home is because either they were abusive, or they just were not, caring or considerate, or they just didn't want, me for a long period of time. Because, as you know, foster carers tend to go for the younger ones. When you get to sort of like 11, 12, 13, 14, foster placements are very hard to come by for those types of aged people. So, yeah, and then, so being bounced around, and then I got lucky. So I used to have respite from one of my foster homes with a respite carer. Now, her name's Ruth. Lovely Ruth. Absolute legend. I was a very hard up individual at this time. A very sort of like chip on my shoulder, why me?
No doubt, mate.
This isn't fair, blah, blah, blah.
It's the fine, brother.
Yeah, and I just think to myself, and I think the biggest thing that I always used to do is put myself in other people's shoes, because I'd never wanted to be in my own. So, I'd always look at my friend's life, and I'd always look at this, that, the other, just trying, I suppose, almost like an escapism, but also to try and sort of justify why it was me that was in this position, I suppose. But then I got lucky, and I met this fantastic carer. Her name was Ruth. She lived with her mum, and her name was Sue. And they were just the complete opposite of what I was used to. They were fully just lovely, caring, considerate individuals, and they taught me a tremendous amount. And it was a time in my life, and my sort of pre-pubescent years, or pubescent years, as it were, where I was actually feeling sort of a happiness, I suppose, as it were. So, and a bit of, do you know what it is? It's also, I wouldn't say carefree, but not thinking without, oh, what about this? What about that? This, that, the other. It was very much like, oh, what are we going to do today? Kind of. It
was back to being a child again.
Like that. Yeah, literally, and doing things like, we used to go, walk she loved her animals. She was a member of the RSPCA. At this precise moment in time, I wasn't an animal lover, but yeah, absolutely. She taught me new things. She got me involved in new things. And then I ended up doing a half marathon at the age of like 12, 13. Walking, running, with other people as well. Raised some money for the RSPCA. I helped out the kennels. And she was doing up her house, and she had builders in, and she got me engaged with the builders. And the most important thing she ever did was instill the importance of education in me. Education. Now, I didn't really care for education too much. It was just a means to satisfy, I suppose, teachers and parents, as it were. I can speak English. Why do I need to learn English? I can count money. Don't need to know maths, When am I ever going to know the compound of oxygen, or air, as it were? Why do I need to know the compound breakdown of water? No, I don't need to know any of that. Shut up. All right. It comes in a bottle. That's all I need to know. Right. But yeah, and she instilled the importance of it all into me and stuff like that. And it was a great period of time in my life. But this is where I started to really emotionally develop, and this is where I sort of sculpted myself, as it were, because I never really had anyone to do that. And I suppose when I look at it, I kind of knew the man that I had to be, and through the man that I wanted to be, and how to get there, if that makes sense. So I knew what I wanted to be and who I wanted to be. It was just, I've got to shape myself into being that. And so, yeah, and this is probably, I wouldn't say a mistake, because I am very fortunate to be where I am now, but it was a very tough lesson that I had to teach myself. So there was, I can't remember what the incident was, and I'll speak to Ruth, I'll get her on FaceTime and I'll ask her, why did I ruin this placement? But I knew that I ruined the placement deliberately because I'd become soft. I'd lost my edge. I'd lost my, my fight, my resilience. I'd lost a big part of what protected me. I was vulnerable. And, at the age of, I think it must have been about 12, 13 at the time. Yeah, I think about 13, just going into my 13th birthday. Believe it or not, prior to that, I never actually really felt vulnerable, because everything was just new, adventure, and you're fearful for a moment or two, you're unsure, you're nervous, but then I suppose as a young person, you can convert that into excitement. And that's something that I'm very good at, is when I look back at it now, is converting those negative emotions and feelings. And I suppose I look at it now, it's probably not processing them properly, but back then it was just converting them into emotional feelings where I didn't feel scared, nervous, or afraid. So
I would say I'd put it out there that there's a lot of blokes, fully grown adults, that have that same coping mechanism, that have that same patterns of behaviour, that we just choose to do that because we block out the pain. And I had Dr. Theora, sorry, I keep calling Theora, and she was on episode 7, I believe, and she basically shared this thing about how males, particularly, we block out traumas by doing those mechanisms you just described. It's so weird, isn't it, that we do it? It's just like, oh.
And I'm no psychologist or anything like that. This is just merely me looking back at my life, and with the education that I've had now and the experiences I've had now, and I've had 30 years of learning. So being able to sort of look back now, I'm able to sort of probably process it, analyze it, pick it apart, and actually really sort of see the mechanisms of it all, and see how it all fits, and see where it played its part, as it were. So me converting those feelings of fear and nervousness and being afraid into sort of like, right, we'll convert that, put that into being, all right, well, what's the new adventure, what's exciting, this, that, the other, so yeah. And obviously that didn't actually allow me to build up sort of like deep set emotional kind of, I suppose, functions, i.e. feeling fear, feeling afraid, feeling nervous, feeling scared, because I seen them as weakness. And if you, I suppose, in sort of like the looked after children sector, if you show that you're weak, that's it. You're easy. You're literally, you are this. Let me show you, you'll be fish food, son. You'll be fish food.
You got your little fish food tub.
Oh no, yeah.
We can be light-eyed about it because it's quite deep stuff. It's good to
absolutely. Sometimes, but again, I suppose that is me. I suppose not so much now, but I definitely do stuff like that as a sort of deterrent to kind of get me away from the emotional aspects of it all.
Yeah.
So so Ruth, what a lovely lady. But yeah, I felt myself becoming very vulnerable, and so I don't say I deliberately jeopardized that placement, but I must have done something wrong. And I remember all she wanted was an apology, and she'd happily keep me there, and I just refused to apologize because I knew that probably wasn't the best place for me with regards to building up my resilience and not being seen as weak,
Do you
So
reckon
then,
if it
yeah,
would have
that
been
kind of,
different? Just real quick, I'm really curious.
no, absolutely. It's a
Do
question
you
I ask
reckon?
myself quite well. I say quite a lot. It's a question I have asked myself, and I definitely think I'd be a hell of a different person now. I think I would have been. I wouldn't have been such an abrasive. I mean, I'm quite an abrasive individual. I'm a tough go-getter. I am what you like to say. I wouldn't say a man's man, but I'm definitely a lad. You know. Um,
Do you reckon
yeah, I
if
like.
Ruth had a fella, like a husband or something, do you reckon you would have not done what you did?
Possibly, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, I think the funny thing is, I've never actually had that real positive role model, but we'll come on to that in a second.
Yeah. Let's have it.
Because I already had this sort of notion of what a male role model should be, even at a young age. I knew what I wanted because I seen it all around me. I see my friends' fathers, and you know, just even like my other foster brothers and sisters, and they had visits from their parents and that. Like, I never had that, so I very much appreciated what I wanted from an old man. You know, say old man, say my father. That's what I call an old man. But we'll come on to him in a minute. So yeah, I definitely think that given the circumstances. One sec. Yo, geez. Thank you.
Hey, I'm on YouTube.
Yeah. Can you hear?
A tiny bit, but hey, in like the shadows,
You know what? Well,
it's calm.
fortunately,
It's
well,
calm.
I am like trying to do an interview here. Yeah, the little Letter, I love you.
Do you know
Right,
what?
sorry, bro. I do apologise
No,
about
don't be
this.
sorry.
Previous as well.
This is organic, and this is what I love. You're like the first
Yeah.
guest to go, hold on a second, and then just go, I'm moving
Oh,
rooms. It's mint. Mix it up.
oh no,
Mix it
I've
up.
lost you. Where are you gone?
I'm here, bro.
Oh, I can't see you.
You got it.
Sorry,
Just keep. You're right, bro. Just keep looking at the screen. You look beautiful. I can see you.
well, I need to see what's going on, to be fair. I have no idea. Oh, this interview is. Oh, there you
Don't
are.
don't.
I've got your back.
I was gonna
All
say
right.
don't press that big red button like Ali G. Don't press the big red button.
Oh, dear. Sorry, let me just. I do apologise, viewers.
It's all right.
I share my house, you see now.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, we're in my bedroom now.
Right. So where we are at. You was talking about the placement at Roof. You jeopardised it. You
Oh.
felt yourself getting weak. What happened next? Like, were you back into a different home? What was the crack?
So what happened there was social workers came and then they ended up taking me to a new placement, and I ended up going to a placement that was sort of in the estate, Saffron Lane estate. Those that are not from Leicester, just think of your council estate type of place. People out on the street, drinking, smoking, playing football,
Mm-hmm.
you know, occasionally come back with a moped that you found.
Yeah. What's that doing
Yes,
there?
that kind of so that kind of place and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So that was an experience because when I moved there, that was sort of very much what I needed and wanted at that time. So yeah, it was that kind of really toughened me up because I had become soft, and you know that kind of got me back on track with regards to where I needed to be, with regards to resilience levels, with regards to toughness levels, with regards to being able to deal with, I suppose, certain parts of bullying over the times, that time frame,
Yeah.
and also not getting caught up with myself, not
Mm.
being allowing myself to feel sorry for myself, I suppose. But yeah, even though back then I was really sort of lacking in emotional development in certain areas, I was so far ahead in other areas, i.e.
Yeah.
resilience, i.e. being able to deal with change, trauma, etc. So yeah, So I moved to the estate. It was absolutely class quality, met great people, and it gave me a sort of a new perspective on life. But a long story short, with that one was the same kind of theme.
Yeah.
Biological families get treated very different, and of course now I'm 14 at this time, and I already knew how much money they were getting for me each week. And I suppose you'll hear a lot of young people in the care system talk about money, especially
Yeah.
during those ages. As soon as they have the concept of money, and obviously that the money that the foster carers get from social services and the local authority is for them, you will not hear them stop talking about money. So obviously, and I was one of them. So when I worked out how much money they got and I found out, I started looking at things very differently. Like, hold on a minute, if they get this much money and that much money, why am I only in these types of clothing whilst everyone else is in nicer clothing?
It's a very good shout.
Hold on a minute. When they get a certain amount of, because I suppose the people that don't know, people in care and foster carers, you know, foster carers will get clothing allowances for the young people they look after. I think it's 3 times a year. Then they get, birthday allowances, they get Christmas allowances, they'll get a holiday allowance as well. And then also the wages on top of that, I suppose, as it were. So when I kind of worked it out and I was like, hold on a minute, this isn't right. Like, the biological children are running around in clothes, like brand new spanking clothes that they haven't had before, and
Uh,
when it come down to myself, it was very much like, oh no, that's a bit too expensive, you can't have that. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you've just brought that for your daughter or your son, like, and the worst thing about it is, in those moments, you got to think to yourself, when there's a meeting with the social workers and the foster carers, and you're in there, and they kind of preach this whole notion of, yeah, we treat them like our own son, we treat him, he gets everything that we would get our kids, and this, that, the other. And then in the very next breath, or say in the very next moment, as it were, and you're out shopping and that, you can't get that, it's too expensive. But their biological child's running around in
crazy.
the most expensive clobber you can get. And I suppose we're only talking about material things, but I think we've got to appreciate here that, to a young mind, think to yourself, what matters? The latest trends, the latest gadgets, the
Of course
latest
it is.
console, and your friend group.
Yeah.
That's it. That's your world, isn't it?
Yeah.
Realistically,
And if
and
the
this
other
is what you're
kids,
measured by.
if the kids are not getting it either, well, it's fair play, but they clearly were getting,
Yeah, and I
they were
think
being treated
this is what it
superiorly,
was.
weren't
It was very much the disparity, the sort of unequal treatment of it all. And
they? Yeah.
believe it or not, that's not what affected me the most. What got me the most was always the fact that when the professionals were there, when the social workers were there, and the head of teams or whatever, they just lied through their teeth. Oh yeah, we treat them the same. They get exactly what, we love them like they were our own, and etc. etc. Like, and they get this, that, the other, blah blah blah. And I suppose as a young person, you kind of feel intimidated by that. And of course, you'll see the behaviours change. So I noticed that, you know, we'll go back to the foster carer where I was only getting a sandwich, bag of crisps and chocolate. Whenever the social worker would
Gosh.
come round for visit, I would always ask for food. And I knew it was always going to be a yes, help yourself. Because I knew at that point, like, I'd already clocked on. I took advantage of that.
Yeah,
So
well, why not?
I would grab the biggest sort of, chocolate bar. And I mean, I remember it was like 12. I'd go for the apple. The reason why I picked an apple was because it was the one that was going to fill me up the most.
Hmm.
It was the fruit that I least liked at that precise moment in time. I like grapes, I like bananas, strawberries, but I picked the apple because I knew that at least through that I'm going to be more full than I was if I was to have the banana or the
Yeah,
grapes or
got
the
you.
strawberries. So yeah, and so to hear, obviously, the foster carers saying that they're treated like their own and this, that, the other, that really grated me.
Oh, no
Anyway,
doubt.
this is where a lot of people would say, I suppose the professionals at the time, was where I took my turn for the worse. Every young person has certain moments in their life where they do a very ridiculous thing. you can call it the rebellious phase, but actually, I don't think it's a phase as a whole. I think it's just moments within that time frame. So for me, I remember finding, some money in a drawer. And obviously at this precise moment in time, I'd already knew to the fact that how much money they was getting for myself. I knew that they were lying to the social workers about how they were supposed to be treating me like one of the family, etc. So, you know, the temptation's there, is there, is there. So I took a cheeky little 20, and it was a good sizable wad. Um, and then next day I took another 20. And then the next day I took a little bit more. And then the next day I took a little bit more. And then one day I just took the whole lot, and this was all in the space of 1 week. And you know what I did with the money? I bought myself some trainers. I bought myself some clothes. I bought myself the latest phone. And back then it was the Nokia 3270 or
Oh,
something
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
was the one above, like, so we're talking about 2003, so it was like a 7210 or something like that.
Yeah, man.
But, and the craziest thing is when I look back at it now, I knew what I did was wrong at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And looking back now, they could have been, they might have been depending on that money. And, it's not something I'm proud of, obviously not.
No.
But again, for me at that precise moment in time, it was very much me thinking to myself, well, do you know what? I'm entitled to this. And if they're not going to get it for me, I'm going to get it for myself.
Got
And
you, man.
obviously it came to light that the money had gone missing. I denied it. Okay, it's fine. We're going on as normal. And then obviously they started to blame the other foster child that was there at the time. And again, this is probably one of a moment that I'm very not proud of, but I redeemed myself, and we'll get to that. And I allowed it to happen for a couple of days. And the way they treated him was absolutely disgusting. They weren't physically abusive, but they emotionally abused that young lad. And,
Yeah.
treating him like an absolute idiot, bringing him back in straight to, coming back from school, eat, go to your room, come downstairs, get supper, go straight to your room. And in that, it was very sort of like, you're a disgusting boy. I can't believe you'd do this, that, the other. And I suppose this is where I'm thankful for Ruth, who had actually showed me a different way in life as well, whereby she sort of like tried to build that emotional being where I could be sensitive, where I could be compassionate and understanding
Yeah,
and be
massive.
nervous and scared. So
Yeah.
one day they asked me also, because he obviously, the young lad, he was denying it, and they asked me like, "Oh, Danny John," and they were treating me okay, I suppose, okay at the time, like just normal as it were. And they asked me, and I was like, "Do you know what happened to the money?" And I was like, "Yeah, I took it." And they looked absolutely mortified, and I remember the look on their faces. And they asked me to repeat myself, and I goes, "Yeah, I took it." And again, I think this is where the combination of feelings and emotions and structuring myself and creating myself kind of come into play. So
Yeah.
I had the braveness to say it was me because of the early years where I'd built up that lack of fear, that lack of sort of nervousness and feeling scared, as it were. But then also I learned from being with Ruth that compassion, understanding, doing the right thing, justice. So I combine them all together, and obviously you don't know that at the time. You really don't. You just
No.
you just do because you're young and you can't
So
compute these
true.
things. And then boom, lo and behold, I came out, I said it, and literally they were straight on the phone to the social workers, quite rightly so, because I don't know, it must have been about £800, which is a lot of money, especially back then. So yeah, absolutely. And boom, I got shipped off into a children's home. I have skipped out a few stories that I've,
No, that's
probably
fine, mate.
people don't want to talk like,
That's
but
fine.
they probably don't want to hear. I mean, obviously, you know, I've got a bit of a rap sheet, as it were, from doing silly things and
Yeah, yeah.
I breaking an entry and yada yada yada. So, but I don't want to distract from the points that we're trying to make with just stories. So, we've gone into a children's home, and well, this is where I suppose the real learning started. the real sort of make or break time for myself. So,
Oh yeah.
as you quite well know, a children's home. You explain from your perspective what your concept of a children's home is, and then I'll give you my perspective as a
Okay.
young person in the children's home.
Children's home. This is going to be a real blanket statement, like quite stereotypical, but all unique. The children, all got their own story. Broken, damaged, forgotten, neglected, abused, but so strong and resilient, and they block it out, and their street wisdom and knowledge is just more than most adults. Risk-taking behaviors, not scared of much, will do anything to cause a scene. Good banter, but struggle to trust and think that everyone who will get close to them will drop them and forget about them. But yeah, just damaged and want to be loved, but won't make out that they want it. But the dynamics and the everyday life, every day in a children's home is just so different. Ups and downs, people are at different points and behaviors and levels, but it's just the most amazing thing, and just a privilege to be part of amazing staff teams and to be part of amazing young people's lives. So yeah, man, that's my take on it all.
Right. To be fair, that's fairly good. To be fair, as a young person, so I'll talk you through it. My first time in a children's home, I was scared. I remember it. I was so scared because I'm in the lion's den now. I've got young people who are they know the home, and it's a very different dynamic. It's not a foster home where you're with a family. It is a building with young people in and staff members.
Survival of the
That's
fittest.
it
That's what
is
I've got to
very
say.
much. It is like the rules that you apply in prison would be the rules that you apply in a children's home from a young person's perspective. You show weakness, expect to have, please forgive me, have the piss taken out of you, to be bullied. You know what I mean? You show signs of softness, you're gonna get walked all over. You're gonna be like quite literally treated like a bitch, you know. And again, please forgive the language. But this is me being quite frank with you because this is real, isn't it? So
Of course it is, man.
this is what this is what I had to go through. So for me, first day in there, it was the one time where I didn't want my social worker to go, let alone family. But boom, so more time. I'm there, doors closed. I'm on my own. They're all staring at me. Not one of them have approached me. I've just been shown to my room, and my room is very much like a very basic room. Fortunately, it had an ensuite, so I had my own bathroom and whatever. So that was good. And this is where I think I did myself justice. And again, this is probably down to the fact that I built up some skills and I built myself up to an emotional aspect where I was able to do this. There's two options. You stay in your room or you go out of your room. You stay in your cell or you roll out to canteen. Well, I rolled out my room because I just knew, and I don't know what it is. I don't know what it was. It was just something that I just knew that I had to do in order to not be considered as a weak target. So I've gone out and, with the two lads that were there and two girls, and, the girls were like, all right, not like your normal, like, all right, okay, yeah. And the lads, one of them looks at me and I look back at him and then he starts going, and I just put my head down. I'm like, right, cool. it is. I've sussed the place out, etc. He was a little bit bigger than me at the time. I mean, I was a skinny little boy, and I remember I am so out of my depth. I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know what I am going to do.
Mm.
Shit.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's the first time in my whole entire life at that point, given what's happened,
Yeah.
where I've actually felt genuinely scared.
You've been through so much where
And
everyone would be scared, but to then get to that point, that must have been terrifying.
yeah, and it was a new feeling for me. And it was very hard for me to compute from what from what I'm feeling right now. And I remember, like, it was almost like a controlled panic, because I had enough control over myself, feelings, and emotions to not allow myself to be panicked, but I was feeling panicked. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I felt so alone. Literally, I felt so alone, and I was like, right, I am on my own now.
Mm-hmm.
This is me. Right. Please forgive me, but I remember saying it to myself, Danny, this is no time to be a pussy. Not up and shut up. And that's it. You just got to crack on with it, you know? But I remember exactly saying that to myself, Danny, this is no time to be a pussy, you know? And please don't think I'm being sexist or anything like that. It's just obviously, it's just a general phrase. And at that time, you don't really have the concept of sexism. It's very much like, right, you're either this or you're that.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was that. And, this was no time for me to be scared. This was no time for me to feel sorry for myself, you know? So yeah, I cracked on with it. Now, that place taught me so much. I can't actually express it, because it's almost like a feeling. If you could feel what I feel, then you'd understand how much and how important that place was with regards to my development. So, in a nutshell, it was chaos. It was hard. You had kickoffs, you had bullying, you had traumatic experiences, you had people. I remember, so true story, I got into a bit of a beef with one of the guys, and you know staffing within the sort of residential sector can be really stretched at times. So there's only 2 members of staff on, there's 5 children, and it's very much right, well, you fend for yourself at this precise moment in time, because the staff are not going to really help you, because they can't, because they're either dealing with someone else or on the other end of the building. So I ran into my room, and I've got my door, and then they're banging on the door, kicking my door, this, that, the other, quite intimidating. And I snuck a screwdriver into the home in my PE kit that I took from DT, so design technology, and that was my weapon. And I remember standing at the door ready, and I thought to myself, well, if it's going to go down, it's going to go down, and rather than be me, you know what I mean? Rather it be them than me. Absolutely, 100%. That was my philosophy. That was my mental state. And they couldn't get in through the door. All right, cool. And then I've gone into my room a bit, because obviously the way it was I had my door with then a little sort of, like, I wouldn't say hallway, because it was literally merely a width of a bed kind of hallway, which led onto the bathroom, and then to the right was the bedroom. And then I hear the squeezing of a plastic bottle, and then there's all this liquid coming in underneath the door. Well, it was urine. Someone had obviously, one of the lads had peed in a bottle and then squeezed it underneath my door. And that, to me, was another sort of moment where I thought to myself, like, I just wanted to cry. Literally, I just thought to myself, what the fuck am I doing here? And I'm sorry to use such language, but you can imagine, a 14-year-old boy nearly in tears, saying to themselves, what are they doing here? And obviously there's many stories that I've missed out in there, because it's just, I want to get to the points that I'm trying to make, and to get to why I'm where I am now. So, that's just an example of some of the stuff that I'd go through. And that was on a regular basis. There was fights, there was beatings, there was, ganging up on people, and I hold my hands up as well. There was times where, because in there you forge relationships fast as you break them, and then you change allegiances
Yeah.
as fast as you make them. So, and again, I'm not going to sit here and play the victim, because I was the perpetrator. I was the bully. I was an individual that, you know, beat people up at times as well as being beaten up. So it's very much, you know, it's a dog eat dog world. You've got
Yeah.
to do what you can
It
to
is. Yeah.
survive on that, because if you're not beating someone up, you're getting beat up. So is that. Um, so yeah, and yeah, long story short, again, um, I met. Well, actually, no, there was an important part in this bit. So going through that, there was all this sort of craziness, and there was no discipline in myself. I'd become quite off the rails at this precise moment in time, and in the place like that, there is no, even though there is structure and there's an expected, young people don't see that. It is very much like, right, I'm going to do what I want when I want,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I can, because you're not my dad, John. You are staff. That is it. And I suppose that's the difference between being in a children's home and a resident and in a foster home, because you're with a family. Oh, you know, say for example, John may say this, so I can't do that. You know, Betty can't. You know, Betty will be angry if I did this, that, the other, so I won't do that. Whereas in a children's home, it's like, I'll do that, and I don't give a fuck what you say, because you're just paid to be here, and you go home at the end
Yeah.
of the day.
Yeah.
So this is my house, etc. So that's the mentality between foster home and children's home. Anyway, so I'll give you this one last story before we get to the good bit. I'll come back from school one day, and there was a lad, and he used to pick on me, and I used to just take it, because I was scared. And he kicked the ball at me. I got out of the taxi from school. Obviously, you remember how you get taxis, you know, local authority pay for taxis and stuff like that.
Oh my gosh.
I was lucky enough to never actually like get the yellow bus, no, the local authority bus, that would take you to and from school, because that would have been an absolute nightmare in itself, and the bullying from that
Yeah. You just feel
alone.
shame. Yeah.
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 So I come back from school, and this lad, he tried to blast the ball at me, tried to boot the ball at me, and it missed me. And then he was like, "Yo, go get the ball," and I was like, "No." And I remember previously, I think the weekend, I think it must have been like a Monday or Tuesday, but on the Saturday, Sunday, I had a visit from my uncle, and you know, I remember him sitting down in my room with me, and he's like, "You got to be tough." And my uncle's quite a strong individual.
Yeah.
He's, you know, in sort of my sort of area, as it were. He's got I don't want to say a reputation, but people know him, and he's someone that I looked up to because of his stature, the level of respect that he
Yeah.
commanded,
Yeah.
and I always admired that. Anyway, so and he was, for as tough as he was always kind of soft with me, and he was like, "Dana, you know, you got to be tough, bro." And I remember it. You know, he goes, "Once you realize you're not made from glass, you will realize how strong you are."
Wow.
And I was like, "All right,
Wow.
cool."
That's pretty
And
true.
I was there, and I don't know. He probably robbed that quote of someone, but
Not
and
Google.
and so I got out of the taxi. He's blasted the ball at me, and he's asked me to go get it. I've said no. He's then walked past me and just full on shoulder barged me, and I don't know what came over me, but quite literally, I've just dropped my bag. Like, I've just flung it off my shoulder. I was like, "What the F you doing?" And
Yeah.
he's just turned around and shot. And this is the moment where I realized something. And the first time I ever realized it was, someone's eyes can tell you a great deal about themselves. Now, we know this as adults, but imagine being a young person and seeing it and understanding it in that precise moment in time. I saw fear in his eyes.
Uh-huh.
And this was a moment where I thought to myself, holy moly. Don't want to swear too much.
Yeah.
Holy moly. I'm going to mash you up. You know? And literally, so to save face for himself, he's postured to me. And then this is where I've absolutely laid into him. And, you know, you're getting pulled off by staff at this point, and as long as we won't get into the nitty gritty of it all and that, but you know, I ended up getting done for 2 accounts of, well, I got 1 account of ABH and then 1 account of common assault, because in the melee of it all, I actually accidentally hurt a member of staff.
Yeah.
And the point that I'll get from this was that young person never bothered me ever again.
Got
There
you.
was no pee underneath my door. There was no booting my door down. There was no kissing of the teeth. There was no shoulder barges. Do you know what I mean? There was no deliberately slamming the door in my face. There was no deliberately spitting in the cereal so I couldn't have any. You know, like there was none of it. It all ceased. A blessing and a curse, because now I think I'm the big I am. You know, and here I am. I'm rolling around thinking I'm all this, I'm all that. And anyway, there's a guy. He works at a children's home, a different children's home. He came over to cover. Now he knows all the like sort of like Leicester boxing gyms and stuff like that. And he heard what had happened, and you know, he was like, "Oh, I hear you're quite handy with your hands." And I was very sort of like, "Yeah, I'm what this, that, the other." He was like, "Oh, you should come down to the gym, etc." So he took me that very day after school.
Sick.
And this is what changed me, I think. I went down there. I got tuned up. I got absolutely tuned up, you know. So here I am, being afraid, this, that, the other, trying to be this someone that I'm not actually meant to be, then being someone that big I am, again, being something that I'm not meant to be, and then getting tuned up again, like thinking I'm the big I am. And it's literally like a roller coaster of like, whoa, where do I stand in all of this? But what I got from that was not to be a PUSSY. And I will go back. And I will go back. And I am not going to be defeated. I'm not going to lose. I'm not going to allow myself I seen it. And this is how tough I was. I'm not going to be disgraced by my actions. I'm not going to be disgraced by me walking away, you know? So I went every week, twice a week. And there'll be days where I run there and it's 2.5 miles there. You do the full 2 hours training session,
man.
and then 2.5
Good
miles back and
discipline.
you run. And twice a week.
Yeah.
And the craziest thing is when you hear people like boxers say, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It gave me discipline, this, that, the other. I learned a whole new skill set that made me, I suppose, or would make anyone quite a dangerous individual. If you know how to throw a punch, you know how to handle yourself, especially around people who don't, you can be at the top of the
You're a
pyramid,
lethal
as it
weapon,
were, you know,
ultimately.
in that sort of like home, as it were. Not one fight did I get into. Not
Amazing.
one problem I got into.
It's amazing.
It really did change me. And I think it was the fact that it was a gym with all men. And I still go back to the story of, if there was a man in my life, do you think it would have changed? I definitely do think that.
Yeah, man.
Because being in the gym, being with, you know, the guys, the man, the man them, as it were, you know, and they're all chiseled and ripped and strong, and you know what I mean? But they respected each other. They spoke to each other with respect. It wasn't like, yo, yeah, I'm gonna bang you out, or yo, we wait till we spar, bro. I'm gonna tune you up. Like, it was not that. It was like, yo, literally, you caught me with a really good punch there, bro. Like, and it was, I'd never seen that.
Reciprocated respect as well, isn't there?
Yeah, like I'd never seen people fighting each other and then shaking their hands at each other and, you know, saying that was a really good shot. Or like, oh, yo, literally, if you would have went to the body after that uppercut, bro, that would have done me over because I was winded. And from there on out, it was very much like, okay, cool. I don't need to fight, you know?
Amazing.
Because I'm not approving anything. And it's nothing that, you know, what am I trying to prove? Am I trying to prove it to myself? Am I trying to prove it to somebody else? So now I'm about 15 now, you know, I was there for 2 years. So 15 and a half. So I've been boxing for about a year and a bit. And I haven't got into too much trouble. You know, the odd blip here and there, the odd cheeky little barricade in my room when there was a new girl in there and stuff like that.
Oh, no.
But yeah.
That's why they have all boys and all girls homes now.
And so yeah, and then a miracle happened, as it were. I'll say a miracle, but my father actually gave consent to my uncle and my grandma to be my kinship carers, which was something that I always wanted. Because obviously, as I previously mentioned, my grandma I absolutely loved.
Yeah,
my uncle was someone who I respected. and I've not really spoken about him too much, purely because of the fact that the person that he is now really isn't the person that I respected back then.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
but and he was someone who I always tried to emulate after. You know, he was
Mm.
a strong, tall, good-looking man who had pretty girls and had nice clothes and was respected. Well, that's what any man wants, really, to be honest
Yeah,
with
yeah,
you.
sound.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I had like a walking, talking family member of that. So, yeah, anyway, long story short, I actually moved in with them, and that was not what it was all cracked up to be, because then my uncle became heavily religious to the point where he was unrecognizable with the person that he is.
Oh,
And it then
yeah, you
made me,
mentioned that.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
he made me resent him as an individual, and then also the religion in itself. To
Got you.
which then that broke down that placement, and then I moved out at 16, 17 years old and got my own place. I'm going to whiz through this now because I
Yeah,
feel
because
like
what happened at uni? Yeah, what? Because this is the defining moment for you. You said that this
yeah,
moment. You said to me, I think the first week we were talking about if you was 5 seconds too early or 5 seconds too late, it might have changed the whole trajectory of your whole life. So
absolutely, yeah.
before we close, I want you just to like
Absolutely.
enlighten
So
our
we're gonna
viewers with
I'm
it.
gonna whiz
Sick,
through
man.
that.
Yeah,
So
fine.
literally, had a flat at 16, 17. It didn't go too well. I'm thinking I was a big man that I could handle it. Reality is, what does a 16, 17-year-old know about paying council tax, water rates, gas and electric, rent, and keeping on top of work
Yeah.
and making sure food, you got money, you're gonna spend it on clothes, trainers, and things that you didn't have. So I ended up
Yep.
with bailiffs at my door. I ended up running away to my old man, believe it or not, who lived in Scotland. And because I was old enough now and I can make my own decisions and choices, I spoke to my father. He says, yeah, well, okay, that's fine. I moved to Scotland. And, I lived with him and his wife and, my sister. So I've got a stepsister. And unfortunately, that placement broke down, not so much between the relationship between me and my father, coincidentally enough. It was down to the fact that my stepmother really had a dislike towards myself.
Yeah.
And she really put tremendous amount of pressure on my father, which then put pressure between me and him,
Got you,
and
man.
broke down. And I thought to myself, no, that's it, I'm coming back. I lived with my grandma again, and that wasn't going too well because old school living versus new school
Oh,
ways, it was
yeah.
just fictitious.
Too old.
And it was tough. It was tough. And obviously in that period of time, a lot had happened, i.e., this is where I became sort of more sort of like, I suppose, sexually active, and those types of situations and experiences, going out with certain girls and so on and so forth, really brought me out of my shell, gave me a confidence boost, but a different type of confidence boost, because around women and girls, I was very sort of like introverted. I didn't know really how to talk to them, and like, I quite openly say I didn't lose my virginity till I was about 18 years old.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like the last out of my bunch. But then obviously you can imagine being, like a young lad with your own place. That was no longer an issue. But
Yeah.
again, the problem with that is that I didn't actually formulate good, strong relationships. And there was, even though I respected women, did I really respect women in that respect? And I think because of my naivety and my upbringing and the lack of teachings around that, I don't think I did. But I also had an idea of what I needed to be as a man, as I've previously touched on before. But yeah, and then with grandma, and she gave me an ultimatum. This was for my adult life. This was where it all started. She said to me, Danny, you're wasting your life. I'm going to give you two options, in her little Fijian accent. I won't try and emulate it. She goes, you either get yourself in education, or you get yourself into work, or you get out my house. I was like, rah, okay, cool. What am I going to do here? So I actually tried to sign up to the Marines. They weren't drafting in, well, sorry, their next training draft was in January. We're in sort of like August, September now,
Oh,
so
yeah.
sort of August time. So I walked into my local college and said, literally, what's the quickest way to go to university? Because I knew that there's only certain things that are going to put a roof over my head, and that was the army or Marines or whatever, or going to uni where I can get a student loan and pay for accommodation, and that's it. At least I get free money. So yeah, and so I've gone to college. I've got to wait till January. I've got time to kill. So yeah, I signed up to college, and I just thought to myself, right, do you know what? I can read, I can write. a little bit of application and a little bit of dedication. That's all it takes, Danny. And I convinced myself of this. A little bit of application and a little bit of
Like
dedication.
that.
That is it. That is all it
Application,
takes.
dedication. Come on.
And you just write it down. And again, I'm still trying to find myself. I still haven't shared my story with many people at all because I was afraid of it. I was afraid of the whole showing weakness. And I see in my story as a weakness. Being in care, being a looked after child was a weakness. It was a weakness to myself, a chink in my armor. So I didn't really ever talk about it. And then obviously going through college at that time, you know, pretending to be something I'm not. But we'll get onto that in a second. So yeah, going to college, and I met this guy called Robin Winston. Now he used to be a youth worker, and he used to run a football team for looked after children that I used to attend and used to go to occasionally when, you know, I wasn't at boxing training, or when, you know, my foster carers would take me, because sometimes they just wouldn't take me. And he was like, "Oh, hey Danny, what you doing? You all right?" And this guy is an incredible man. You know, his name's Robin Winston, and he can speak like 4 different languages, and he's just amazing. He's just a quality guy. Anyway, so I walked in, and he's like, "Yo, how you doing?" He stopped me. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm late for class." He was like, "Okay, like late for football." Like, look, he made a reference to football and how I was always late. Even when I did turn up, I was never on time. Um, and he was like, "Oh, so what's your plans then? What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm just killing time because I want to join the Marines and that." And he was like, "Did you know?" And this is literally it. He turned around and said to me, he goes, "Did you know, because you was a looked after child, you get funded to go to university. That means they'll pay for your accommodation, they'll pay for your student loan, they'll pay for any kind of equipment that you need, and travel, okay, and all your bills, Danny." I was like, "What, really? So what? They pay for a roof over my head, food in my belly, and money in my pocket?" Because that's basically what I needed at the time. When my grandma gave me that ultimatum, I just needed a roof over my head, food in my belly, money in my pocket. That was it. So that's the only reasons why I decided to join the Marines and go to college.
Yeah.
Well, college was just to fill time till the joining the Marines. So then I thought to myself, holy shit, okay, cool. All right, that was useful information. And we'll come back to the 5 seconds before and 5 seconds after. So more time again, I applied this application dedication, and I'm doing my course and that, and then it come around about end of December, early January time, or just before the Christmas break, or just after the Christmas break. I can't remember which one. Any college, when you're doing A levels or whatever, you have to do your UCAS sort of application and stuff like that. And you know, it was part of my course. It was part of the curriculum. So it was not that I wanted to do it. I was like, "Oh no, I've already made my mind up. I don't want to go uni." No, but in order to pass this course, you have to do this. So I was like, "Oh, screw it," you know. So I was doing it, and this, that, the other, and obviously they get sent off, as it were, and I literally I get a letter back, and I get my conditional and unconditional offers. I couldn't believe it. So I was guaranteed a place in university, regardless if I passed or failed.
That's mad.
And I just thought to myself, how mad is that? I never saw myself, despite everything. It boiled down to 3 moments. My grandma turning around and saying, "Listen, I want you out of my house if you're not paying rent and bills." Or, you know, and the fact that, you know, they was prepared to accept me. So, a bit like me going into that course. So, a long story short, I got my conditional and unconditional offers, and then I think it was like about, I want to say 6 days later, I get a phone call from the MOD saying, "All right, Mr. Shiri, we would like you to attend a 10-day training course down in Somerset." And I was like, "Oh, well, actually, I've decided to go to university." And they were fully understanding and this, that, the other. And at that precise moment in time, I knew where I was going. I was going to university. Now, it was something I'd never thought of before. I never thought I was capable. I wasn't an academic. I understood the importance of education, but I didn't at that precise moment in time. Like when I understood, like, say, with Ruth teaching me the importance of education, I just brushed it off. But this is where it becomes important, because I thought to myself, well, education is just a little bit of application and dedication. So if just like I apply, even if it's just 50% of myself, just applying yourself and then dedicating a portion of your time to it, that's it. That is literally it. It's not like it's asking you a great deal. So, I adopted that as philosophy, and boom, I got there, and I ended up doing a HND in business management, and I came out with a distinction because of the fact that it was just a little bit of application and dedication. I have no academics around me. My grandma is, a Fijian woman, so she can't help me with anything. My uncle had no interest. I didn't have people around me that was interested. So this is where I say I applied myself, put myself in the library, a little bit of time. It was only so even if it was just 45 minutes, 45 minutes a day or every other day. And that's all it took, as long as I just wasn't behind.
Class.
So yeah, and then obviously I got accepted into unis, and then a whole new chapter started. And this is where...
Have you got your cap? You got your cap?
Well, we'll get to that. So this is where my life really started to take a change. And this is where I was sort of allowed myself to be empowered by my story and about what I had done. Because now I'm looking back, and I'm, in my early 20s. I went to uni a little bit later. So I was about 21 when I went to uni. And I'm looking back, and I'm almost proud of what I've achieved. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of pride for myself and within myself. And, I remember sharing my story to someone, and it was very much like I fully went in, like I have done today, explain, not so much detail, but who I was, what happened to me, my transition into where I am now. And what? I'm here now, and
you are, mate.
I'm very confident and comfortable with who I am. And so for me, I was very much like, wow, this is incredible. I started to change. I started to change my mentality. So I was still this young person with a chip on his shoulder. Why me thinking that in my head? Yeah. Which wasn't, when you think something, you project it as well, especially if you think about it long enough and it's on your thoughts,
so true,
mind every single day, you are that, because it's all you think about. So I started to sort of chip away at this bloody chip on my shoulder, saying, why me, why me, why me?
Flick it off.
Just there with the hammer and chisel. And I started to think to myself, okay, do you know what? This is me, this is me, this is me, So here I am, and I've got my social worker, my 16 plus worker, and he set me up with all the accommodation, and he made it as easy as possible for me, a new laptop, and etc. And he said very simply, he goes, if you want this to continue, pass the year. Boom. So I absolutely had the best 4 years of my life when I was at
amazing,
uni.
bro. Changed your life, uni, doesn't it?
It does. And I think everyone would say that it was the best years of their life. But for me, I suppose probably only subjective to me, but it really, really changed me as a whole individual.
That's amazing, bro.
I was, do you know what? I never was fearful of telling my story. I used it as a tool to try and inspire young people, to inspire people who say,
you're inspiring me, mate. Yeah, mate.
But because the funny thing is, there's one thing that I suppose through this I learned is, for those that can't say they can't, and that they say it's too hard and this, that, and the other, I'm sorry, but I can't gel with you. I'm not vibes.
Tell him, Dan. Tell him. If they made it this far, we've gone in tonight. But if they made it this far, tell them. Stick it on them.
Stick it on them. Yeah,
what is their excuse? I'll say to the viewers now, non-judgmentally, but come on, you've heard this guy, you've heard the story. Surely this is going to inspire you to make that change and to put your stake in the ground. What do you say? Dedication? How's it go? Come on, what's that? Those two words?
You know what it is? Dedication and application. But I like to say just a little bit, because when you say dedication and application, it means they're quite big words, But when you say a little bit, because when I promise you, just a little bit every day or every other day, but just at least apply yourself,
bro.
Dedicate yourself to the application. Just, I don't care how big it is, for how long it is, just just do it.
Yo, me and Paolo are going to do 3 weekly podcast like type talks, like almost like how this has felt tonight. We're gonna have to get you back on, bro.
Say no more. I will happily help the cause.
We're gonna have to get you back on and just talk life, because this is just pure fire. Mate, I'm gonna have to park it here because this is like pure meat. Pure meat with just full roast dinner, and you've just nailed it.
Well, yeah. let me just quickly just hit you with just. I'll round it off because that changed my life. It allowed me to be in a position where I allowed myself to be open. It was the first time I allowed myself to be open, because being open allows you to, you're susceptible to being vulnerable. But sometimes I just want to say to people, like, it's okay to feel vulnerable. As long as you've got the mechanisms to make yourself strong again, it's okay to be vulnerable. And, through that aspect of being open, my life has changed exponentially. So being a young person in care, bouncing from home to home, not knowing where I was going, and probably being the 94% statistic, I now have a beautiful home with a beautiful missus, I have a good job. I have everything that I want and need in life, I know it sounds quite materialistic, but from someone who never had nice things as a younger, I now have, I have a watch. You've seen my collection of watches.
Oh, I love his watch collection. It's like new watch each day.
Yeah, I know it sounds again quite showy, but I have a TV bed, and I have a beautiful home with the latest mod cons and etc. etc. And that is purely because of the fact that I feel like, because I didn't have those things when I was younger, I can have them now. But also to the fact to say that, you know what, I remember laying there thinking to myself, why me? Why me? Now I say to myself, yes, me. This is me. So
My
absolutely.
guy.
I know I would love to have gone into more detail about the 20s to 30, but
well, that's why we'll bring you in part 2, brother. Come on, let's have it.
But absolutely, for those that say they can't, that's not a good enough excuse. For those that say that they've had it tough, I'm sorry, but you have the power within you to make it right. At the end of the day, you are the master of your own destiny.
Oh my gosh,
so
I'm feeling the fire. I'm sweating.
But forge your own path in life. That's it.
This is mint. I just want to say to the viewers, like, you're probably gonna have to rewatch this, and if you made it this far, amazing. But this has been class tonight. I've really enjoyed. I've heard small snippets of this story, but I can't even wait to get you on again so we can just go even deeper and pick up. But yeah, man, I just want to say before I just say bye to you, thank you so much, brother. Thank you for being so vulnerable. It's been class.
No, thank you, my G, and I appreciate what you're doing out here, and you're doing some fantastic work, bro. And I suppose it made it easier because I've got to know you, and you're a very transparent individual, which I like, and that's like myself. And what I mean by transparent is, there is no hidden agenda, there is no sort of like ulterior kind of motive, ulterior motive. It is very much what you see is what you get, and I like that. And you're just a genuinely good person, and I can gel with that absolutely. And being able to share that story with someone who I trust and respect, it's easy.
Thank you, brother.
And I forget that this is going to go out to the masses.
But yeah, speaking of the masses, guys, before we say bye now, we just want to say thank you so much. On the screen right now, I want you to click on this YouTube channel when you finished, and I want you to get on that red button that's just right there and click subscribe. And when you've done that, I want you to share this video just as far as possibly you can. Coming up on the screen right now as well is our Twitter and Instagram handle. It is at Enlighten the SH1. So get on Insta, get on Twitter, follow us. Again, share things. Big things are happening in Light in the Shadows. I've just had my first meeting with Paolo. He's jumping on board the team. He's pumping and excited, ready to go. He's going to get on the socials more because that's his gift. We're looking to get some funding in. We're going to set up some great stuff. We've talked about having some public events. So there's some big things coming your way to help you. And all I want to say is it's not about me. It's about the movement. And the more we can get this and get more plugged out there, the more people get reached and we can change lives. So thank you so much for joining us. This was episode 9 with Danny Shiri. And I just thank you so much for your support. All right, guys. Cheers, Danny, mate.
Boy, my guy.
All right, see you, bud.
See you later.